the left-hand side here, the theory of teams, this is a summary of that social network research into teams. And what 50 years of study has fairly conclusively shown is that closure, bridging, and leader centrality, these are three different kinds of social network structure, and I'll be filling in more details behind this. But basically, these team studies have shown that closure, bridging, and leader centrality are all positively related to the effectiveness or performance of teams. So high-performing teams are those that have high levels of closure, high levels of bridging, and high levels of leader centrality. Now, we use that as kind of a base point, and we came up with propositions to say, what do we expect to see in open source project communities where we're trying to now predict success? I'll define what I mean by success in a minute. But we took the same three kind of constructs for social network structure, and we said we recognize that in some respects open source communities are like teams. In fact, the software that's produced by these communities in many respects is indistinguishable from the software produced by, say, software teams. But we also recognize that the process is different. We know there's definite differences. And so what we've done is we've tried to pick up where we think there are similarities, but we've tried to also reflect the differences between the communities and the teams. And so in the case of closure, for example, you can see that rather than proposing that there's going to be a completely positive relationship, we suggest this inverted U. Now what the inverted U does, it basically says for these lower levels of closure, you do have a positive relationship. But at some point, you're going to reach a maximum level of success, and then after that, as you have more closure, you have a negative relationship. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and I'll be describing more specifics of what's behind that. But basically then, we proposed in the case of closure and leader centrality, we thought we would see an inverted U relationship rather than a positive one. But in the case of bridging, for various reasons I'll describe in a minute, we also expected to see a positive relationship. What we found was obviously very surprising. The results for these 143 projects, in the case of closure, we found a completely negative relationship. So, in a sense, we did anticipate some negative relationship in the upper levels of closure. We just didn't expect to see it even in the lower levels of closure. So basically, it says that closure is a bad thing. It's not a normative structure for open source communities. And that's surprising compared to what we thought we'd see, and it's very surprising when you compare it to teams where the most effective teams have the highest closure, whereas the most effective open source communities have the lowest closure. Now, in terms of bridging, what we found is basically no relationships. As I get into it, there's a couple of significant results, but overall, as I'll argue, we really think that bridging is not an important factor in success of open source. We thought it would be, and it's certainly been shown to be important in teams. So we need to describe why that is. And finally, in terms of leader centrality, the results were really inconclusive. I think we tried to be conservative in that statement. There were two results that we believe are spurious, and if in fact they are spurious, then we're also seeing this kind of no relationship in the leader centrality. So leader centrality then may also not be an important success condition for open source projects.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why this is question mark and why this is statement? Because what you're saying is the same things for the success and bridging versus success and leader centrality.
What I'm saying,
success versus bridging and success versus leader centrality. Whatever you explain, it looks like the same thing. So in one case you're showing that as horizontal, in another case you're showing that as a question mark. So
right.
What is the difference you're trying to make?
Yeah, the difference is that, as you'll see here, we actually, for each proposition, we test 4 hypotheses. So I look at the results across all 4 hypotheses. And actually, in this area, there was 8 different hypotheses, and 7 of them supported this situation. Here, only 2 of 4 supported that. So because only half supported the idea of no relationship, we felt a little bit unsure in concluding no relationship. But well, I'll get into the specifics on it, but that's why. Okay, so it's a little less clear result. Does that answer the question? All right, so basically now I'll go ahead and proceed to try to explain how we arrived at those, try to explain what they mean for open source. Now, of course, open source is relatively new. It's been around, maybe 30 years, maybe a little bit longer, but certainly in the big picture, it's quite a new phenomenon. There's a lot that we don't know about it. And we've tried to capture what we don't know about it in sort of 3 mysteries. And these are the mysteries that have really motivated this work. Now, there's an economic mystery. And the economic mystery says, how is it possible for these communities to sustain economic production without having any real direct financial incentive or governmental assistance? Well, it turns out that the majority of open source contributors are individuals who volunteer their time and effort for various kinds of reasons. There have been a lot of studies about that that say they do it because they need software, they want to develop skills, develop reputation, whatever, but it's not about being directly compensated. Now, we also recognize, though, that perhaps as many as 40% of the open source contributors are paid employees of corporations. That's not always recognized, but more and more we're seeing that. So there's a segment of open source that is corporate sponsored. Now, in those cases, there may and probably are different motivations for the employees, but if you step back and look at it from the perspective of the company is still making a voluntary choice to apply their employees to this work without direct profit incentive. In most cases, the companies that support these are not directly profiting from it. Now, there may be strategic reasons, et cetera, but when you step back and say, you know, we have some significant and sustained economic production going on, classical economic theory says this should not be possible. There's supposed to be rents, there's supposed to be profit returns, and you don't have that. So it really is an economic mystery. The operational mystery says, how can these communities develop this useful and sometimes quite sophisticated software in an environment that is self-organized, it seems like chaos? Basically, open source developers choose what they want to do, and they do it whenever they feel like it. So this is an amazing environment. It's been described by Eric Raymond as a bazaar, a B-A-Z-A-A-R, bazaar, where kind of everybody seems to be coming and going. And so when you look at how the operational environment, it's certainly a mystery if you were an operational manager, say, how in the world can we coordinate